Hello, my friends. In this video, I want to talk about our blessed hope. We are looking forward to our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. Our blessed hope is the return of Jesus in our future, the second coming. And we get details of what will happen at the second coming in the parable of the net in Matthew 13. We get these details from the very words of Jesus in the red letters. In a previous video, I explained the parable of the wheat and weeds, also in Matthew 13. These two parables in the same chapter teach similar lessons. Jesus repeats the lesson for emphasis and to help us remember it, and since Jesus repeats the same teaching, it must be very important. The context for this parable is the same as the parable of the weeds, so you might want to watch that video first. By Matthew 13, Jesus has been casting out demons and has mentioned the final judgment on the last day and how people will be separated, some being justified and others condemned. Before we read the parable of the net, I want to quickly review the parable of the weeds because I want you to spot the similarities between the two. Jesus likens his return at the end of the age to a farmer who sowed good seed in his field, but his enemy sowed weeds in it. The farmer tells his workers to let both grow together until harvest time. Then the reapers will remove the weeds and burn them, but gather the wheat into the master's barn. Jesus is the owner of the field, which is the world. He sowed the gospel good news of salvation in himself, but the devil sowed lies and murder into the world. These seeds take root in people's hearts. If the gospel takes root, you become wheat, a son of the kingdom. If the lies of the devil take root, you become a weed, a son of the evil one. When the Master Jesus returns in our future for the great harvest, people will be separated by the angels. The wicked weed people are removed from the field of the world and thrown into the fiery furnace of hell. The faithful wheat people are removed from the world and taken to the kingdom of our Father, into heaven where we shine like the sun in the heavens. Now, keeping that parable in mind, let's read the parable of the net. In Matthew 13:47, Jesus says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. When it was full, men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into containers, but threw away the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Hopefully you're already seeing some parallels. Notice that Jesus says again, because he wants them to know that he's repeating the lesson. Here's yet another metaphor about the kingdom of heaven in the second coming. It's like a net thrown into the sea by fishermen that gathers all kinds of fish. The word gathers here is a harvest word that the Jews of that day would have recognized as referring to the resurrection on the last day. In the Feast of Booths, which was the harvest festival, they looked back to the ingathering of Israel in the Exodus and looked forward to the regathering of Israel at the resurrection. This word is also found in the parable of the weeds and in the final judgment passage, Matthew 25:31, that I talked about in the Olivet Discourse series. But here it's not crops that are harvested, but fish. Of course, we use similar language when we talk of fish farming, also known as aquaculture. Farming language is used of fishing. Once the fish are gathered, they are sorted into good or bad. That's a picture of the final judgment when Christ returns. And notice there are only two groups. There are always only two groups when Jesus teaches: sheep and goats, wheat and weeds, foolish and wise virgins, wicked and faithful servants, the justified and condemned. Here, good fish and bad fish. But the Greek word for bad is unusual. It refers to something corrupted, worthless, rotten. Jesus said a good tree can't bear rotten fruit, though many translations will just say bad fruit. Here, it's not just bad, but rotten fish. Imagine the horrible stench of rotting fish. And consider that for the fishermen, rotten fish aren't just useless, they're actually harmful. You can get terribly sick or die from eating rotting fish. This is the picture Jesus gives of the unrepentant sinner. They are, in some sense, repulsive to him. Another thing we see in this parable is movement, as in all of the teachings Jesus gives on the second coming. The net is drawn ashore, moved out of the sea onto the land nearby. Then the rotten fish are thrown away. In Greek, it means to cast out. It's a rejection of someone, and it's used of people who are cast out of the synagogue by the Pharisees. They are rejected from fellowship. And at his return, Jesus will cast out the unrepentant sinner, just as he said to the goats, "Depart from me." That's a permanent rejection from fellowship with God and Christ for all eternity, a fate too horrible to imagine. The rotten fish are cast out, but the good ones go into vessel. That into is the movement word here. But then what happens to the good? The parable doesn't say because it's not necessary. In those days, everyone knows the fisherman will take the fish home with him because they are valuable. Parables don't need to explain what's obvious to the audience. Those details are left out so it can be short and easy to remember. Next, Jesus gives a brief explanation. Jesus is the master fisherman who will return at the end of the age. He will send out his angels who are like the workers, and they will separate the fish. Now, I don't like this ESV translation here because they left out a very important word in the Greek. It actually says the angels will separate the evil out from among the righteous. That's important because it confirms what is taught in the parable of the weeds. The two kinds of fish are always together in the world, just like the wheat and weeds grow together until the harvest. It's only on Judgment Day that the evil are removed from among the righteous, and then the evil are thrown into the fiery furnace, which we all know is hell. Now let's watch the animation of the parable of the net and see how similar it is to the parable of the weeds. The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea. The sea represents the world, but who threw the net? Obviously the master fisherman, which is Jesus. The master goes home while the net gathers fish of every kind, good and rotten. At the end of the age, the master returns for his catch and sends his angels to draw the net ashore. They remove the evildoers like rotten fish out from among the righteous and cast them out into the garbage. The believers are the good fish who are sorted into a vessel that will be taken home with the master. And we learn that the garbage is really our old friend Mr. Fiery Furnace, representing hell. That's where eternity begins, and the final state of the parable shows the final state of humanity for eternity. All the wicked are in hell, all the righteous are taken home to heaven by Jesus, and the sea of the world is left empty. Now you see all the similarities with the parable of the weeds. It's almost the same animation with different graphics. And just as we saw how the parable of the weeds disproves many errors that are taught today, this one confirms that. Jesus doesn't teach a left-behind rapture where the good fish are removed first and the bad fish are all left behind. Think about it. A net can't do that. It can't remove only the good and leave the rotten. The evil and the righteous are only separated on Judgment Day at the second coming of Jesus. He also doesn't teach that we spend eternity on a new earth. Are the good fish thrown back into the sea of the world? No. They go home with the fishermen, a place they've never been. Are the good fish transferred from the old sea into a new sea, representing a new world? No. Rather, the sea of the world is left empty, just as the earth will be empty after Judgment Day. That's what Jesus teaches, not only here, but also in the parable of the weeds, and the parable of the 10 virgins, and his description of the final judgment. I explained each of those in other videos. So when I hear a teaching that disagrees with what Jesus taught, I reject it. Jesus is right, and those who disagree with him are wrong. You can disagree with me, but a Christian shouldn't disagree with Jesus. In summary, Jesus teaches us about his second coming in the parable of the net in Matthew 13. Jesus is like a master fisherman who will return in our future for the great fish harvest of resurrection and judgment. He returns with the angels who will sort people into two and only two groups, either good or rotten, either evil or righteous. The evil, like rotten fish, are removed out from among the righteous and cast into the fiery furnace of hell to spend eternity rejected from fellowship with God and Christ. The righteous, like good fish, are taken home with the Master because they are valued by him. And the sea of the world is left empty because everyone will be moved to a place prepared. We who follow Jesus will be taken home to his Father's house in heaven, a place we've never been. I bet many of you know the joke about the man who was pulled over for speeding. As the cop is writing him a speeding ticket, he says, "Officer, why don't you ticket all these other drivers? They're all speeding too." And the cop says, "Have you ever gone fishing?" The man says, "Yes." The cop says, "Did you catch all the fish?" Jesus is going to catch all the fish when he returns. And you and I either must be in the good or the rotten category. So make sure you're in the right one. In the parable of the net, Jesus teaches us about the blessed hope, his second coming. This is the hope that enters into the place where Jesus has entered into heaven itself in the presence of God. That hope is an anchor for our soul. Now, what does an anchor do? It keeps you from drifting away. We all need to have our soul properly anchored, which is why I've made several videos about this blessed hope. It's a hope we should all be looking forward to, and I hope I have blessed you with this video. Thanks for watching and for your support. God bless you guys. Bye-bye.